Hello, everybody, and welcome to Todd and Shane's Cloudy Podcast, episode 431, recorded live Wednesday, May 1st, 2019. I am still Todd. He is still Shane. I hope I'm still pointing in the right direction for those
You got
of you
it.
who watched the video. Yes! I actually watched last week's episode this morning, so I would know you're over there.
You should get a little doll and just have a Shane doll, so you can just point at the Shane doll and be like, "Whoa!"
If there was a Shane doll in my room, I would probably point at it would not just come into use, Wednesday morning.
Hey, children.
It's a family-friendly podcast. We need to keep that rating on iTunes. So speaking of all of that, we don't talk about this much, but you can find us on iTunes and Google Play and find us wherever. If you have a podcast aggregation that you use to get podcasts and we're not on there, let us know. Email us, tweet us at Todd Clint, at Shane's Cows, whatever. Let us know. But you can get us on YouTube. We're all over. ToddClint.com.
Yeah, we are very prolific on the internet, right? You can't throw a dead cat or a live cat, either one, right? You shouldn't throw a live cat though.
No, they hate that.
not this.
Yep. That's that whole thing, if you want somebody to do something, make it easy for them to do. We want you to watch this and listen to this and enjoy it. So we do what we can to make it easy for you. Production notes, the folks at Syskit enjoying my incredibly level and professional looking sign right there.
I can only imagine the great pride they take.
Yep. And so they've got a new version of Security Manager out. Came out a couple weeks ago. I haven't really hit that one hard. I've been waiting. Like when it first dropped here a week or so ago, everybody was tweeting it and Facebooking it and LinkedInning it and Instagramming it and MySpacing it and all that. So I've kind of waited for the excitement to die down. But I'm going to be hitting that here in a couple of days. It's their tool for finding out where files are shared and who has access to what in Office 365, which is something that only every customer I ever talk to asks about. Only every one of them says, how do I know when files are being shared, who has access to what? Where is that in Office 365? It's not easy to find. And so Syskit Security Manager helps find that.
Yeah, and I feel like it moves, right? Not only is it not easy to find, but once you find it, it might not be there tomorrow.
No, it's in many places. And I was looking through some PowerShell code that I wrote that exposed internal sharing, and those properties aren't there anymore. So I don't know if I wrote them down wrong. So yes, it does. It goes all over. So check that out. And you can go to syskit.com and find it. You get like a 30-day trial. It's going to end up being like a 7-day trial because then you'll fall in love with it and you'll buy it right away. But check that out. Episode 430 I haven't published yet, but I will do that today. It's all done. I just need to press the button. So that will be out there. And then as we have the last couple of weeks, at the end of this episode, after we do all the boring tech stuff and then boring other stuff, then we're going to get into spoilers for Game of Thrones, Season 8, Episode 3,
Yep.
The Long Night. And we will spoil the crap out of that episode. So if you don't care about Game of Thrones, which has a very vocal group out there, so it's like there's a big group of people that are like, oh my God, Game of Thrones. And then an equally vocal people like, am I the only one that doesn't watch Game of Thrones? As thousands of people are posting that same thing. So if you're one of those people, shut off the podcast. We'll give you plenty of warning. Don't worry. Or if you don't want the episode spoiled for you.
Yeah, no, that's so tough, right? So I want you guys to know about the personal pain I've been putting Todd through. So basically, we both watch it on Sunday night, right? Mm-hmm. But then I won't talk to Todd until now because I'm afraid that if I talk to him earlier in the week, that we would talk about it. So literally, I have been avoiding Todd on Monday and Tuesday for the last 3 weeks now because I don't want to have the conversation because I want you guys to hear our raw feedback.
My raw thoughts on it. So feel free to tune out if you're in the chat room. And again, once again, like I said, there's a bunch of people that are making sure everybody knows that they don't watch it.
Yeah, we got it.
We've got it. It's like the old, I don't even have a TV, or, so that's coming at the end of the episode. We'll give you plenty of warning.
There you go. So speaking of plenty of warning, after like a year of teasing us, finally in my tenant, I should notice this week that SharePoint sticky columns showed up.
Oh.
So when you have a list, with hundreds of items and you start scrolling the bottom, it used to be the headers would all go away so you didn't know what column it was.
I hate that.
They have fixed that. That is rolled out. I'm told that it's not like completely out, but I'm not in one of the early releases with that tenant, so I think it's pretty close to fully out. So anyway, that feature, not a big deal, but finally it has shown up.
So I don't remember, and I've got a bunch of tenants, so I don't remember which ones have it. I've been dealing with a lot of data. I'm writing some PowerShell that's transforming data, putting it into spreadsheets. and it's thousands and thousands and rows of stuff. And that exact problem hits me every single time I open one of these documents up. I forget to freeze the headers at the top, and I scroll down and look for stuff. And I'm like,
do it again.
So yes, that is a very legitimate thing if you're dealing with lots of rows of data. So that's cool that made it.
Yeah.
And that's and I've been rolling a bunch of customers out. I've got 2 or 3 rollouts with new Office 365 customers, and I just can't tell them enough. This is never done. There's always new things coming out. The interface is always changing. It changes in different, between your dev and production tenants. It's never ending.
Yeah. Well, and that was so I didn't have it in the notes, but you did remind me with the developer tenants. Did we talk, or we already talked about that on here, right? That developer tenants can now be renewed.
We have not been on the same podcast, so many times in the last couple of months, but it bears repeating. Go ahead and tell them about it.
Yeah. So remember, if you don't know, right, you can sign up for a free Office 365 developer tenant. And it used to be you got it for 1 year and then you were done. Boo. Yep. So now they will auto-renew as long as you're using them, but they do it on 90-day windows. So as long as you are getting in there and deving and making things. And right now, one of the things I want you to think about, when you hear developer, I realize a lot of you just fell asleep. Who cares? But really, we're all developers, right? We're citizen developers. So go out there and use it and make something, and then you don't have to worry about it going away.
Yeah, and I was hoping you would say that the tenant is free, because it is free. Because I was all ready to come in with a snappy comeback that says, it's not free. You have to sell your soul by telling Microsoft that you're a developer. You need to say, I'm a developer and I would like a tenant, please. I remember it was very agonizing the first time I signed up for one of these. I had my little mouse. I was just staring at the screen like, do I want to say this? Do I want to? But I've had this discussion a lot about whether I'm a coder or a developer, because for the last 6 months or so, I've been writing a lot of PowerShell for customers to just fill in little things here and there. And Mark and Julie are all like, you're a developer. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. Stop saying that. But it's getting tougher and tougher to deny.
I build custom apps from a blank screen. I understand the pain.
Yep, it's tough. And when we were at SP TechCon in Austin, was having supper with Bob German, and he was like, yeah, of course you're a developer. I'm like, why would you say that, Bob? He's like, anytime you write anything that has a structure, you're a developer. I'm like, but Bob's such a nice guy, and I can't argue with Bob. I can't tell Bob he's wrong. I can't do that.
Yeah. No, we have these arguments when, like, the Flow group I'm in, right? Like, is JSON code? I'm like, no, it's just text with curly brackets around it. But then another guy's like, well, if it has syntax, it is, and it's key value pairs. And right, there's so many. The gray area is just so big in this space that you just have to pretty much accept that it's all right. Either you admit you're a developer, or you're not. We're almost all doing something that can be in some way classified as developing at this point.
So I think that might be my loophole. I think I'm not a developer, but I do developer-like activities. Maybe that's how I skirt around this issue.
Yeah. Well, speaking of developer-like activities and SharePoint list, one of the things I did finally after months of promising to do it. So Daniel will be very excited. He's in the chat room. But I built a timesheet app for Power Apps 911 finally, so we can
excellent.
Quit running our business on spreadsheets and emails and start actually having timesheet app. So pretty cool. I mean, I literally built the whole thing in like 2 hours. I probably should have done it a long time ago. But it's a combination of Azure SQL database as a service for storing the time, and then the customer info and the project info is actually all fed out of SharePoint. So we're kind of which is pretty typical, right? We end up with these solutions where some of the data is here, some of the data is there, and we just bring it all into one platform.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping, we use QuickBooks Online for our actual, run the business.
Yep.
They have an API, so at some point I'm going to attempt to write to the QuickBooks Online API so that we can actually push the data, the approved time, straight into QuickBooks. So who knows?
So I think, so I have many thoughts about that. Number one, yes, it's about time that you wrote such an app, because it's so obvious that you would write that, doing what you do and what you. The other thing I will say is it feels a lot like inventing the wheel. Like there's been a million, timesheet apps. Like this has been done before. But I can see if it took you 2 hours, I can kind of see it. The third thing is we also use QuickBooks Online, and there are a ton of things that I hate right in the face about QuickBooks Online. So it would be awesome if you got that API thing figured out, and then you could write a Power App that fits the way that I want to enter things into QuickBooks Online, not the dumb way that QuickBooks makes you do it.
Yeah.
So yes, get on that.
No, it's interesting. And it's funny that you bring up, right, that the Timesheet app is like reinventing the wheel. And so I can tell you that we've built probably 5 for customers. And what it is there's a lot of these commercial ones that are out there, and a lot of them cost, upwards of 6 figures to
Wow.
have a Timesheet app. And what happens is those guys are having to make their business fit the Timesheet app, right?
Yeah.
And so they're like, wait a minute. So for, 20 to 40 hours, you can build me a completely custom Timesheet app that does my things my way, processes time the way I want. It has been such a game changer. We keep talking to these people, and they're like, oh my God, you can just make it do what I need instead of, I'm like, yeah. And so, yeah, we've written one, so ours took 2 hours. Another guy's took about 40. Another guy's probably took close to 40. But they've integrated the Timesheet app because it now fits their business. So
Right.
we're collecting additional information. We're processing stuff. We're notifying people. We're getting safety sign-offs. It's really kind of crazy when these people can just make a Timesheet app that does what they want instead of these packaged ones. So yes, it's reinventing the wheel, but whoa, it's a pretty popular wheel that is being reinvented.
Yeah, and I can tell you, and you've been on the business end of this a couple of times, I'm horrible at paperwork. I'm horrible at putting hours in and all that. And part of that is because it doesn't fit the way that I think about things and the way that I want to do things and all of that. So I think there's a lot of value, even probably difficult to measure value in writing the app that's exactly the way the worker wants to put their time in.
Yeah.
It fits exactly, because I would do that. Like I was just talking with Mark, the other day, and he's like, well, for this customer, we have to do this and put this bit of information in, but with this customer, we have to do this other thing. And I'm like, wait, I have to put that same information in every single time I set up a thing. Why can't there be a way it's just all these things. If you can make it fit with the customer, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's really, that's what it boils down to, right? Is make it be what you want it to be instead of just having to put up with its crap. And
Yeah, that's great.
I think that's where Power Apps is just blowing away the competition, right? Because it's not like, hey, we built a Timesheet app and it was 5,000 lines of code and it took 4 years to build, right? I built ours in 2 hours. So
Yeah.
And Dan said that I need to get some peer review before I'm allowed to release that to the team. I was hoping to do that, Dan, but it turns out that we don't have anyone here that is my peer. When it comes to Power Apps.
Lord.
So as soon as we get a peer, that's a little knife for Daniel. He'll chime in the chat room here in a minute.
Oh my Lord.
But yeah, then Fausto joins. So half of my employees are finding out that in the chat room, that's how they're finding out that they got a new Timesheet app today.
Yep, that's hysterical. That is hysterical.
Fausto approves.
Oh, well, I can't wait to see it. I'm certainly not a peer, but you can't fire me, so I'm totally willing to tell you something is not good if it's not good. So.
I wrote it in 2 hours. You can go ahead and guess it. It's not amazing, but I'll do a YouTube video on it once it goes live. To Stacy's point, she wants to see it, and I'll happily just do one. So here you go. Here's how I built it. So
sounds good.
What's next?
What have you got for the roundup?
Yeah, so Chris, McNulty posted a April roundup of like some SharePoint things that have rolled out or will roll out, in the near to distant future.
Mm-hmm.
And so since he kind of put that out on the eve of the SharePoint conference, I kind of looked at that document as like, these must be things that they needed to say they had so they could make the announcements at SharePoint conference. So I'm guessing, I think we can call this like foreshadowing, right? Those guys. And there was a few updates. The biggest one I liked was you can now have an organizational assets document library. You can have one or more of those.
Yeah.
So then that way, all those things like the marketing approved logos and the things that you want to make sure everyone's consuming everywhere, that'll be available. So there was a bunch of little other things, but it was more interesting to me though was just this idea that I'm certain these will be part of the bigger announcements.
Yeah, for this one, the one at the top of the list, their audience targeting on SharePoint News and Pages. That is something just yesterday. I had a call with a customer, and this is exactly the thing that they needed, but it wasn't out yet, and it wasn't in their tenant, and things get pulled out of the roadmap. So I didn't feel comfortable telling them, just wait, I'm sure it'll show up. We had to assume that it wasn't there because it wasn't there yesterday when we were talking.
Yeah.
But that is something that has absolute, value to people. So I'm glad to see that's public now.
That's some very good stuff from those guys, though. And it is a guy who writes about, the updates and people who talk about them on their podcast, right? It's been really annoying, this kind of moratorium on real announcements for the last few weeks.
Yeah. It's interesting stuff. So yeah, I can't wait here in a couple of weeks, I guess 3 weeks at the SharePoint conference to find out what is official, what things they've been keeping under their hats that they want to share with us. I'm looking forward to that.
SharePoint Spaces again?
Oh, love me some SharePoint Spaces.
All right.
Some random tech things, and this is kind of an Office 365 thing. I was browsing the news this morning and saw this great headline. Hackers went undetected in Citrix internal network for 6 months. So Citrix is not a security company per se. They do like GoToMeeting and all those things, but obviously security is a big part of their job.
Yes.
They had somebody in their network for 6 months that they didn't know about, and they didn't even catch them. The only way that they knew these people were in their network is because the FBI told them these people were in their network. And the article, this is from TechCrunch. The article, and you and I were talking about this before the show. It's that typical slow release of information. This one, the first article that I saw today, was lots of soft language, like it was about 6 months. Citrix said that the attack likely was the result of password spraying, that customer information, including social security numbers, may have been released. So I think that means it was released. It was, password spraying. It's like that thing, when my wife's like, who ate the last cookie? And I'm like, it might have been me. I don't know.
I assume at that point, both you and Owen both have guilty looks on your face. Neither one of you knows which one did it.
The thing about that is that kid is allergic to egg and he's allergic to dairy, so he can't eat regular. So it's tough for me to blame him. Not that I don't try. I mean, that's, So that, and I bring this up because you and I have this discussion all the time with folks that the cloud seems scary and insecure. And it's guys like us that have been in technology for a couple of decades who have this, this idea, this notion of security that is everything inside of our walls. And this is just another example of that is not secure. That is not, it's not.
Yeah, I mean, imagine, so if they were in there for 6 months, right? And I know that's not really what we want to talk about, but I'm just imagining, at that point they could have edited source code. They could have, clearly they stole every piece of information they could.
Yeah.
But at that point you start thinking about it, right? Are all your Citrix clients that have rolled out in the last 6 months, are they all hijacked now? I just can't even imagine.
Yeah, and I think, and that's happened before. I mean, there have been other breaches that have, people have come out and said our code is whatever because of things like that. So you just you just don't know.
Yeah, and that's I don't even know.
Yeah, and I'm guessing everybody on this call currently has Citrix software installed on their machine or has had it in the last 6 months because they've done a GoToMeeting with somebody or went to a GoToWebinar. Syskit uses it, so I've got it installed. I mean, if somebody got in, not only if I don't even have an account with them, so they don't have my social security number or any of my financial information, but like you said, the code could be compromised. You never know.
Yeah. Or worse yet, right? They're going to find out there's going to be a what's a way to conjugate a Citrix product coming out of some foreign country here real soon. It turns out it does all the same things for half the price.
Yeah. And so this is one, I had a call with a customer just this morning. They're moving to Office 365. It's a done deal. That's what we're doing. They've already got stuff there. We're moving it out. And we were talking about writing some custom functionality for them that was going to store some values, some content in each individual user's OneDrive. And they're like, oh yeah, we can't do that. Why not? I said, well, we're not letting our users use OneDrive. Why not? Well, it's up in the cloud. We just don't know that we can trust it. And I'm like, you realize what we're doing here, right? Like you realize that all of the information that we've been doing, all the important stuff, the HR data, the accounting data, the financial, that's all already going into that cloud that you don't want your users' browsing preferences to be stored in. But it's a tough conversation.
Yeah. No, we have those same conversations when it comes to apps. Like, well, we're not ready to do the cloud things. We want to do Power Apps, which is in the cloud, but we're going to store all the data on-prem. I'm like,
yeah,
you're making this harder on yourself for some fake sense of security. And I still firmly believe that my data is safer in Office 365 than would ever be safer on a network that, any of us jokers ran. So
yeah, I agree. And I wanted to come back to a thing here. The bad guys are always getting badder. And not the cool bad, the bad. And Citrix talks about how they likely got in with password spraying. And I think you and I talked about password spraying a year or two ago.
Yep.
But I wanted to bring that up because, again, the security conversation changes so often that things that were correct about security practices a year ago or 5 years ago aren't necessarily correct now. And password spraying is this idea that instead of hitting an account a bunch of times and trying to get into an account, you use a password a bunch of times and try to get into all of the accounts. And the value of that is it usually prevents any kind of account lockout from happening. So like, for instance, so it's spring of 2019 right now. So let's say if I was a bad guy and I figured out I've got a potential list of usernames for a company. Maybe I'm targeting Citrix, but maybe I'm targeting somebody else, or I just don't care. I've got a list of usernames, and I try the password spring 2019 on every account that I've got. And how many people have had a password that had some relationship to the time of year or the month or whatever? And so I just walk through all that. But it takes me long enough that I don't trigger password lockout or account lockout. And so then I try, May 2019 or whatever like that. And it all goes under the radar because it's not hitting one account all at the same time.
Yeah.
So having account lockout and all that was a good idea 10 or 15 years ago when people did brute force attacks. Probably not going to save you today.
But then thankfully our friends at Microsoft Security, right, they now see when people are doing spray attacks and they can shut it down.
Yeah, and that's the value. And that's, you and I talk about the false sense of security by having stuff on-prem. That false sense of security comes from being able to react to problems. Microsoft, they're proactive. Again, that they see billions of logins every day. They can see these patterns and they can see what's going on. And yep. So this is just another good reminder. You and I talk about this all the time. This is another link that I'm going to have when people say the cloud's not safe. All right, let me tell you about on-prem not being safe.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and we had someone who had an account get compromised. And I still don't know how it happened, but basically they ended up sending out hundreds of emails, spreading whatever thing that had happened. And the Office 365, the Exchange Admin Center caught it and locked out their ability to send emails and flagged it and said, hey, this account is, I think, a victim of spoofing of some sort. You got to fix it and then unlock this person's account. And it was weird. I still don't really understand what happened, but we did some password changes and we did some other things, and then we unlocked it and everything seemed fine. So, and to that end, though, I was thinking what would be really great is if Microsoft would let me set like a threshold, right? Like if this person tries to send more than 10 emails in an hour, lock their account, right?
Right.
Because I know that, that person would never send that. I think that would be a neat little security thing. If the Exchange security team's listening, I'd like to be able to set thresholds that for outbound email.
Yeah. I don't deal with the Exchange stuff enough to know what the options are in there. So I don't know what you can even do.
Well, it's as with everything, it's changing. So half of it's managed through the Exchange Admin Center now, but then half of it's managed through security and compliance. And so when you're in there, it's like trying to redirect you from one to the other. And it's progress. It's getting better. I was able to do what I needed to, but it was very annoying for a little bit digging it out.
Yeah, I'm a convert. I believe in the power of the cloud. It's gotten me.
Yeah. Well, so speaking of that type of confusion, so another thing that I did in the last week was, we do a lot of Teams or Skype meetings with customers, right? We try to use that and apparently you can't use GoToMeeting at all anymore. It was our other tool. But one of the things that we're missing was we didn't have a dial-in number. So you had to have computer audio to get into it.
Right.
So I'm like, I know this is possible. And Microsoft is like, all the content now talks about Teams. But in order to get a call-in number for Teams, you actually have to go buy a Skype license, apply it at Skype, and then that works its way into Teams. That took me several days of research to kind of piece that story together. But now I have a call-in number for all my Teams and Skype meetings, and it's a whopping $4 a month. $4 whole.
Yep. So we're doing a similar thing. Our company voicemail used to be Mark's phone, which doesn't scale well. I'm fine with it, but apparently Mark didn't like that. So we were going to do the same thing. We're going to set up a voicemail mailbox in Office 365. And I'm with you. The documentation between Teams and Skype for Business, and then with that one, we wanted it to go to voicemail, which ends up being an email inbox in Exchange. So figuring all those pieces out and what I needed to buy and what account needed which license, not smooth at all.
Did you get it? Is it all working now, though?
I sent Mark what I think he needs to do. I don't know if he's done it or not, but I think so.
Because today, our company phone number is a Google voice number.
That was my first suggestion, too, because I know how to do that. That's easy. Yeah,
and that kind of works its way around. But that wasn't ideal when we moved, because I set it all up, but now we want Jennifer to be kind of the main person for it. But so there's no way to tell it that I want the emails to go to her instead of me when it gets the voicemail emails and things like that. So it wasn't perfect, but
yeah. And so I agree. And so we were talking about, if we needed another account, and I'm like, this sounds like an easy job for Flow or even an inbox rule. Once it gets into Mark's inbox, then we can do whatever. We can post a thing to Teams that says somebody check it. We can copy it. I mean, once it's there and Flow can grab it, we can do whatever we need to.
Good job. You're exactly right.
I'm learning. Look at me.
Well, I like an update on that once you guys go live with it, because, it might be fun just to move us off of Google Voice, just to be like, ha, Google.
Yeah, I've got a Google Voice for my personal stuff. I don't have anything against Google, but it certainly makes sense from a business standpoint to have all of our stuff in one place.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, we have all types of, I'm not really making fun of Google there, but I just, getting more into the, it'd be another piece of the Microsoft ecosystem to learn like you got to learn. So it seems like a lot of fun.
Yep. Yep. This kind of a non sequitur here, but there was a post in Twitter yesterday, the day before. Somebody was tweeting to your friend of mine, Brad Sams, and he's like, "Hey, I need something to make screenshots, and I want to be able to resize them and do a couple of things." Basically, it felt like he was reading back the marketing schlock for Snagit.
Yeah.
And so I think Brad suggested like the snipping tool or something. I forget what he suggested. And I'm like, dude, you will never regret buying Snagit from TechSmith. And so he's gonna check that out. In full disclosure, Shane and I get the TechSmith tools for free. TechSmith gives them to us because we're MVPs. But I had absolutely bought Snagit before that, Snagit and Camtasia both. With all the things, talking about like Office 365 changing and all that, training materials are so important. You have to have that out there for your users, and they change all the time, and screenshots are a big part of that. And so I just think everybody who does our job should have a subscription to Snagit and just use it all the time.
I completely agree. And, and part of it is the screen capture, right? Which you can be like, oh, the snipping tool does that. But the editor for massaging the photos is just world class. And, at one point in time, I literally edited a photo pixel by pixel to change a word inside of a thing, right?
Yep.
And no, I'm not recommending that, but that's the level of control. So like if you're like afraid of Photoshop, because Photoshop you should be afraid of, I can do a lot of Photoshop-y type of editing of photos in a simple way using Snagit. Oh yeah, I couldn't say enough nice things about that product if I had to.
Yeah, and it's funny. So one of the great things that the Snagit editor has is OCR technologies built in. So like the article about Citrix being hacked, the way that web page was, I couldn't copy the title out of the web page because if I clicked it, it did whatever. So I tried it once. I tried to lasso the title. It didn't work. Without even thinking, I just hit print screen and put a bounding box around it. It popped into Snagit editor. I clicked the button I already had for grab text, copied it out, shot it into OneNote. And it was just like, I do that all the time for pulling text out of web pages and whatever. That works really great. So yeah, thanks to, the Snagit editor, the Snagit tool, Snagit itself does some short video things, so even if you're not doing just stills, it does do some of that. You don't need the full Camtasia. But great products, and I just can't say enough good things about them. So thought I'd throw that in there.
That was so nice of you.
I'm a
Speaking about things you want to say nice things about, what you got here?
Yeah, so I'm having a tough time saying bad things about Edge, which I, as you well know, was the source of much ridicule from me in the past. Microsoft released the dev Chromium-based version of Edge. The next production version of Edge is going to be based on Chromium, which is Google's web browser engine. And so they've got the dev package that you can look at. I think if you go to ChromeInsiders.com or Microsoft Chrome Insider or EdgeInsiders.com, something like that. Lori will put it in the notes. You can download this dev branch of Edge that's based on Chromium, sorry. And it's getting better. They update it. I exaggerate not 3 or 4 times a week. And one of the things that it has now that I really like is profiles. So something I've not been able to live without in Chrome for years now is profiles, which comes in handy because you're saying to yourself, well, why don't you just run Chrome? I do on my main desktops, but I've got my Surface Go here that I've left on Windows S mode. The Edge, the Chromium-based Edge works there. And so now I have profiles on my tablet. That is awesome. And they're slowly rolling things out. So like a bunch of the sync stuff doesn't work. That they're going to work on. But one of the things that they advertised that would work that hadn't before is being able to Chromecast, shoot video to Chromecast devices or whatever. That made it in one of the builds last week, and I tried that out. It worked. So I don't know. We're not at the point now where Edge is going to supplant Chrome for me, but we're getting closer.
Interesting. I haven't tried to build a Power App in it yet to see how well it works, but
I'm guessing if it works in Chrome, it's probably going to work in the Chromium-based Edge.
It's probably a fair guess.
Yeah. But I know there's a lot of people, and I know you joked about it earlier, there's a lot of people who have privacy concerns about Google, so they won't run Chrome for that reason. I don't know that I think those are completely founded, but that's not important. But if you want the Edge, the build is out there. And Lori did put it in the notes. Thank you, Lori. MicrosoftEdgeInsider.com, and you can download it. Works pretty well.
Do they have is it, months away from being like the replacement? Is it years away? Is it they just don't know?
I don't know if they've said yet.
Okay.
I don't know. I haven't been listening to that. Because I don't use the non-dev Edge, so it doesn't matter when, because I will just never transition from the old one to the new one because I never use the old one. But that's a good question. I don't know. But it's been handy. And honestly, for me, another dumb usage that I have for it is I've got a TV that's kind of off to the side that I play music or whatever on, and a lot of that content comes from a web browser. And if you've got your default web browser set to Chrome and you've got YouTube running a Chrome video, if that's the last Chrome instance that you were using before you click a link in email, that link's going to show up in the other Chrome window. So now I use the Chromium-based Edge, not as my default browser, and I've got my content there, so then it never grabs the links.
Oh.
So it's pretty handy. But yeah, check it out if you like to use the Microsoft stuff, especially for somebody like you who develops against browsers. Probably not a bad idea to make Fausto install that and test all your stuff on that.
He needs more work to do. So.
That's just sitting around. I hear he's screwing around in chat rooms during the day when he should be billing. So yeah, get him out there.
Yeah, where's Neil's app at, Fausto? Where's his app at?
Yeah, exactly.
So all right, so those were happy thoughts. So now would you like to go to this dark? It looks like it's going to go to a dark place. I don't know. And no, we're not talking about Game of Thrones yet. I know that was a dark place, but that's a different conversation.
Yeah. So a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, I bought a 3D printer. I bought a TEVO Tornado, T-E-V-O Tornado, and we talked about it a little bit a couple of weeks ago. 3D printing is not yet at the place where my mom can just order a 3D printer and start printing things in 3D. The 3D printer, the 3D printer comes in pieces, so some assembly is required. And then once you put it together, it needs to be calibrated because they don't because now we're legitimately working in 3D space, so everything's got to know where everything's at, and that's not automatic yet. And there are just all sorts of issues. So it is still, as we're 2 weeks in, it is still kicking my butt to some extent. I can print some things. So and I think we've joked about this before, one of the things that I really wanted to print was little nubs, and you probably can't see it in the video very well, to fit in the USB-C connector on my phone.
Yep.
So I have a Galaxy phone that is waterproof, but if you get water in the charging port, then you can't charge it until that dries out. That seems reasonable. I mean, I get why they do that. And so a while back, I ordered these little things that just plug in there to keep water out. So if you're going to the beach or whatever, but they cost like $8 a piece and I lose them all the time. So I have been able to print a few of those out and that's been good. So that worked out well. I printed a couple other things, but I can't get bigger things to print. And there's about 90 bazillion things that can go wrong with a 3D printer. And I'm just trying to figure each of them out, baby step. Is it that, because one of the problems that I have is things won't stick to my bed. So, the way that I think all 3D printers work and the way that mine works is the hot end, the thing that prints, goes back and forth.
Okay.
And goes up and down. So it takes care of the x-axis and the z-axis. But the bed moves underneath it, and that's how you get the y-axis. So the problem that you have is if things don't stick to the bed, as stuff starts moving around, potentially it gets stuck to the hot end, it gets drug around, and then it doesn't get printed correctly. And there's a bunch of things that can cause that, if you don't have the temperature of the bed right, if you don't have the temperature of the hot end right, and then the different types of filament that you use impact that. How quickly it prints and moves around impacts that. One of the solutions that has worked somewhat good for me is to actually take a glue stick and stick on the bed so that the filament sticks to it. Just a bunch of things like that. I'm slowly making progress, slowly being able to print things.
And so what is the largest something you'll be able to build once it's set? Like, what are your max dimensions?
My printer, I believe, is 200 millimeters by 200 millimeters by 300 millimeters. So like 8 inches by 8 inches by 11 inches, something like that.
That's pretty big.
It's a pretty big one, yeah. And that was kind of why I got it. So another one of the things, so I wanted to print these little nubs from my phone. Mission accomplished. Another thing that I want to print, there's a bunch of files. So the 3D files that you need for 3D printers are STL files.
Okay.
And there's a bunch of websites where you can get those. Thingiverse is one where I get a bunch of mine. And somebody put out the model there for a hook, for like a holster for your Tesla charger. So you mount it on the wall in your garage and just the handle clicks in it and it's got, so that's one of the things that I wanted to buy. So when I was looking at 3D printers, it had to be one that was big enough for that. And this one is.
Nice.
But yeah, so I can print things that are about that big. And then once you bring these STL files in, they are hardware agnostic. So then you have to do a thing called slicing. So you have to bring your 3D model into a slicer program. I use one called Cura, C-U-R-A. And you say, I have a TiVo Tornado. So now it knows the attributes of this printer. It knows the speeds and it slices it. And there's a bunch of things you can do. Like if you just need a rough copy, you can have fewer layers, things like that. But then you can scale. So there's a couple of things I've been trying to print little Trans Ams, things like that. I know the big ones, full-size ones will probably take too long and have problems, so I shrink it down to like 25%, try to print it and see what happens. But it's just so many things that I don't understand it well enough to be able to tweak all the things to make it work yet.
That was the whole reason we said, right? It's an educational purchase as much as anything else.
Yes, I would describe it as a frustrating purchase, frustrating experience. So one thing that I've done that is cool and frustrating is when you print with the 3D printer, you can put like an SD card in it and then the interface, print it out. It's got a USB port on it. So like if I plug it into my computer, I can say in Cura, slice it for this thing and then print it out and it'll do it that way. But there is a software package called Octoprint that does all that, handles all that, and it runs on Raspberry Pis. So there's a thing called Octopi. And I have a bunch of Raspberry Pi sitting around. So that's what I've done. I've got a Raspberry Pi connected to my 3D printer with a USB cable. And then I've got a web page where I can drag my models over and tell it to print them, schedule. But another cool thing that this does is it supports a webcam. So I have a webcam hooked up to my Raspberry Pi pointed at my 3D printer. So I can sit in my office, bring up the web page, throw the model over, do whatever I need to, hit print, and then watch on the web page as it prints in the other room. And it does a time-lapse thing, so if I get a print that succeeds, I can go back and watch it. But that's been fun. I actually got that working, and that's been good times too.
Very cool. That's I'm jealous, right? I mean, I'm not jealous enough that I'm going to do anything about it.
No, I wouldn't yet. Yeah.
I was always kind of curious, right? And the thing I always wanted to print, believe it or not, my first weird one was I wanted to do light switch covers.
Oh yeah.
Right, because what I was thinking about was, could you make one that was a little bit ornate, right? Not crazy, but a little texture to it, and then put like, your initials or, the family crest, something like that kind of on it.
Yeah.
I could see that being kind of a classy,
Yep.
output of this. So I don't know.
Yeah, or you and I have houses that are big enough that we have light switches every damn where, and I don't know what half of everything is. And so I would love to be able to print out a light switch that says inside light, outside light, hallway light.
I mean, we're laughing, but I think that is a cool, practical thing for you to like try and figure out with a 3D printer.
Yeah, I this is not the first time I've had that exact thought. And for me, it's because I want to do some home automation stuff that's going to require me to replace those switches. And I don't know all of the switches. So like I need to know if it's a regular switch or a two-way switch or a three-way switch for, a light that I want to control. I don't know where all the damn light switches are that control these lights. So I've thought about that, printing out light switches that,
Yeah. Well, because when we first had this, it's been, 4 or 5 years, probably more than 5 years now. When these first started coming out, I was imagining like a mall kiosk, right, where somebody could roll in and be like, hey, I want to make these 7 custom things, and, and we just spit them out. And clearly it takes too long to print, and it would never work. But that was, I kind of thought through that business model, 5 years ago. And I know there was some pop-up stores that tried to do it, but it just never really worked.
Yeah, I joined a 3D printing Facebook group, and there are a couple of people on there that purport to be making money doing that kind of thing.
As long as they don't value their own time or their...
If you get it down to where there's a better, that is more likely than not that the print will work, I could print a bunch of things. Like I could easily print a couple things a day out there, again, because I don't have to be in front of it. I just have to be in front of it to pull it off, and then I can, upload things from the web and watch it and all that.
Well, there you go. You can start your own little Etsy store, and
I got to be able to print my Trans Ams first.
Well, so, how close is the Trans Am? I mean, is it a pile of poo at this point, or
it's a pile of poo? But it's the same problem that I'm having with other things. I've got the filament's not coming out correctly. So once I solve that problem, then I think the Trans Ams will be fine.
I can't wait. I've seen the nub. The nub looks good. I can't wait to see the first.
And the nub. And so the funny thing about the nub is the nub works. I've got it in here. The model that I downloaded didn't fit. So I had to go into Cura, and I'm like, all right, it's too big, it won't fit in. Print it out at 97%, and that was the one that worked. And so, that's the kind of fun stuff that,
Very cool.
So, now I've had some failure. I understand you've had some successes.
Yes. So last night I finally got all the pieces. I juggled all those chainsaws, and our network is now running fully on Ubiquiti gear.
Excellent.
So, at your suggestion last year, I moved to the access points.
Okay.
And I was a fan, but, part of the challenge of those for me was the whole idea that, you had to install that cloud controller software, which, I had to put Java on my local machine.
It feels dirty.
It felt dirty, and I basically would have to turn off the firewall on my machine so that it could connect. So, basically, if I wanted to manage them, I turned it all on. If I didn't want to manage them, I had it all off. And that worked, but I didn't get to have all the fun of all this network information that's available. So I bought a Cloud Key, and the Cloud Key is that management software, but just on a physical device that you roll out in your network.
Yeah.
And so I put the Cloud Key in and got to learn a little bit about PoE, Power over Ethernet, which I'd never used in my life.
Yep.
But I got that solved, so I ended up buying getting a switch from those guys as well, managed switch that has PoE to power the Cloud Key. And then I added a USG, which is the Unified Security Gateway, basically your edge router.
Right.
And so now my whole network their gear is all managed through this awesome software that is the Cloud Portal. I can see the ins, the outs. I can see who's connected to what, who's doing what, where the bandwidth is. I can segment it off. So I put a VLAN in for the kids, and then put a separate wireless network on that VLAN for them. That's some advanced
moves there. That's good stuff.
I know, and that was like on the first try. So and nothing caught on fire. So
not yet.
I'm kind of pretty excited about finally being able to have this, just this holistic view of my network. I just looked. We're streaming this show. I'm only using 2% of my output of the network right now to get the show out to the internet. So pretty cool.
That's pretty fantastic. I'm jealous.
Yeah, it was a little work. I'm not going to sell it, right? As far as like it took me some solid elbow grease to get it all rolled out, but I've ripped out everything else out of the network now, so it worked.
Yeah, I've thought about that, the cloud key, but I don't get it. I mean, fiddle with my stuff much. I also have some Ubiquiti hardware as an edge device, but mine is an older version that doesn't support the cloud key, but it does support 2 WAN connections.
Yep.
And just this week, Lori texts me and she's like, "Hey, your website's down. What's going on?" It's because my cable modem, my primary internet connection, went out. It was out at the time. My router dutifully switched me over to my DSL, which of course has a different IP address. So of course my website doesn't work. I mean, that just happened, 72 hours ago, 48 hours ago. So I don't know that I could give that up, but I'm wondering if I could cascade them and have that, and then have your one next in line.
Well, so good news. The USG supports 2.
Get that. Shut the front door.
Yep. You just click on that link and you go buy yourself one. Yeah, the USG absolutely has 2 WAN ports. So I mean, I don't have 2 connections, so I haven't tested it, but
You better not be lying to me, Shane Young. Oh, look at that. It does. Look at all those RJ45 connectors. WAN 2, it says it right there on it. All right, add to cart.
But yeah, so it's a pretty cool, it's a pretty nice little setup. And one of the biggest challenges I had, so like bringing it into an existing network, my network was a 10 dot, and the USG wants to be a 192 by default, and so I tried to bring it into the network before I told it that it was a 10. So then it all got lost. So basically I had to go switch my cloud key to be a 192 so I could then get into the USG to make it a 10 to carry my back into the 10 space. It was, so there was some weirdness.
I will have to do that same dance because you and I VPN, well, probably not you so much anymore, but I VPN into enough different customers' networks that I can't run on 10 and I can't run on 192.68 because then I end up VPNing into another network that's in exactly the same address space, and then so mine is on 172 hidden somewhere. I'm not going to tell so the bad guys can't find out. So I would have to do that same thing.
Well, so the good news is I could walk you through the dance this time, so you wouldn't have to go through the 7 factory resets that I had to get it all working.
Well, and this will be fun. This time when we dance, you'll get to lead, not like normal. Yeah.
That reminds me of a cruise ship moment.
It does. That would have to go in the After Dark show.
But yeah, no. So I've been super impressed. Their team helped me with some stuff. Those guys were super helpful. So I'm excited. It's pretty cool. I think what I want to do now is I want to start tuning my access points, because right now it's basically there's one right there and there's one kind of that way. So I think I'm gonna try and start working on because you can see what other networks it sees where it's having confrontations, so it can auto balance that stuff. So I want to try and do a little more.
I'm sold. So I will. I am so sold. I will even use your Amazon associate code when I order these. So I will order the cloud key and the security gateway today. I will make it Amazon official. I will do that.
Very fancy. But do you have a PoE port?
Well, that's a funny thing. I don't. But if you remember those access points, they're all PoE.
Yes.
So you have dealt with PoE before. You just didn't remember.
Yes. Yeah. But yeah, so then you just make sure you order yourself either a switch or you just buy one of those, PoE injectors for. Yeah. And it is interesting. I'm assuming this is just part of PoE, but that switch it's warm to the touch.
Yeah. It's doing some unholy things with little itty bitty twisted pair wires. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was kind of like, you know what? We're not going to stack anything on top of that guy. We're going to let him sit over there by himself.
That is another thing that if I ever get my 3D printing figured out is printing a couple of shelves to put things so that I can get airflow the way I want. And
very cool. Yeah. Man, did we make it through all the topics on time? Look, it's like we're professional podcasters. 431 shows in.
And that is not even close to the truth.
Accidents happen, folks. Accidents happen.
It's complete coincidence. Broken watches, correct twice a day. So let's talk about community stuff. SharePoint Saturday Nashville is June 15th. Woo-hoo. SharePoint Saturday Charlotte is August 10th. I think Dana Christian's going to be there, so you get to see him. SPS Nashville, that's Daniel Glenn. He's going to be there. Next weekend, holy crap, is it next weekend? SharePoint Saturday Atlanta. I will be there. Lori will be there. So if you are going to be at SharePoint Atlanta, SharePoint Saturday Atlanta, you can come meet the two of us.
Make sure you get yourself some Atlanta Chick-fil-A, because Chick-fil-A is better in Atlanta than anywhere else.
At the airport, I'm not flying in or out on a Sunday, so you can do that. Dan Christian's going to be at SharePoint Saturday Atlanta. Awesome. And then in 20 days, SharePoint Conference in Las Vegas.
That's insane. We'll be...
It's almost here.
I've been saving my pennies so we can just go hit that roulette table, put it all in black, baby, all in black.
Yep. Always bet black. Yep. And you and I are doing an admin workshop on the 20th on Monday.
Yep.
So 6, 7, whatever hours of glorious SharePoint and Office 365 administration. Can't wait for that. You're going to be at the Microsoft Business Applications Summit.
Yes, sirree. That is June 9th through 11th back in Atlanta. So I'll get some Atlanta Chick-fil-A as well.
Oh, I hear that's the best.
So still coming together with schedule, but I'm hopefully got a few different things going on there. So that should be pretty fun.
Yep. And then I need to reach out to these folks. I'm doing another remote user group thing. I need to talk to them. And I keep forgetting to put the Power Scripting Live one on there. I'm going to be on there here in a bit too. Remind me to put that on next week.
Yeah.
But that's sometime this month that I'm going to be on with those guys.
Well, hopefully Lori remembers to put it on there.
Yes. I tell you, so as I've been producing these podcasts, it is so much more work producing the podcasts when Lori hasn't been here putting all the times and all the stuff in. So I'm glad she's back today.
Yeah.
I
think that's all the things we got for...
I think that is. I honestly kind of don't want to do the Game of Thrones things because I want to order all this humanity stuff and start playing with that. But we promised, so we will do it. So if you don't care about Game of Thrones, which from what I understand is a very vocal group of people, bid you farewell.
Bye-bye.
We will see you next week for podcast 432. If you watch Game of Thrones but have not watched episode 8.3, now would be a good time to hang up. If you watch Game of Thrones and have watched episode 8.3 and just don't care what Shane and I think about it, this would also be a good time.
Can I hang up on that?
Yes. So I see some folks bailing in the chat room. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week. But from here on out, spoilerific Game of Thrones, episode 8.3, The Long Night.
So what did you think?
I was disappointed.
Me too.
I was, there was so much buildup, both externally and inside of myself. I was disappointed. Yeah.
Yeah, when I checked the internet the next day and people were so, oh my God, I can't sleep. And I'm like, did you watch the same episode that I did? It was predictable. I mean, it was kind of predictable, right? So I was watching and I actually checked the timestamp of kind of when I was doing it because I was that bored at that point.
Yeah.
You know, and like John's working his way through the castle, right, trying to get to Bran. And it's like, oh, look, these guys about to die. They're all surrounded. These guys about to die, all surrounded. These guys all about to die. It's like, you know what's going to happen? The Night King's going to go boom, and then at the last second, all of these people are going to live because all the bad guys will just go. Like, I mean, I literally said that right that moment because it was so obvious how well they did at painting the picture of they're all in peril, they're all going to die, but they haven't died yet.
Yeah. I was, and so to be fair, it was, so it was 90 minutes or something like that. It was better than most hours of TV that I watch.
True.
So, I mean, I enjoyed it, but the bar was set very high. I was disappointed. There were no significant deaths. We knew that Dondarrion was probably going to die because he had kind of one, goal. His little priest guy died a few episodes back, so he couldn't be brought back. So I wasn't too surprised about that. Theon, I was a little surprised about, but like none of the main tier 1 cast got it.
No.
I was a little disappointed in that.
Yeah, and Theon, I mean, I think we all kind of knew he was going to die, right? He had the look of a guy who was going to die when he said, I'll guard you, Bronn, right?
Yep.
And I read an article that was complaining about they gave him this whole redemptive storyline, at the end that Bran said, oh, thank you, you're a good man. Like, oh my God, just kill him and move on. Yeah,
so when he volunteered to protect Bran, I'm like, yeah, I think that's the last chapter of his redemption story. I think that's it. And it was. So I was disappointed in that. Speaking about that scene, so that's when the Night King comes. I was super disappointed, and they've got 3 more episodes, so they might fix this. I was super disappointed that they didn't explain more about the Night King. Like, why did the Night King care about Bran? Why did the Night King stop all of the Whites and the White Walkers from killing Bran? Why did he walk over there? What was he going to do? We have no idea. We'll never know unless they explain it in the next 3 episodes. It was just, there was no there.
Yeah, well, right, we had that. I kept wanting him to talk, right? I wanted to hear him say something. But no, and to your point as well, if you think back to, like, you know, Night King-y stuff, one of the things, like, remember the whole babies and, you know, turning the babies?
Caster's babies, yep.
Yeah, feel like I should have gotten something, right? I mean, is there significance? Is there more of them still out there because they don't have the same I mean, there was a lot of, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know what part of that you don't, isn't full, but I mean, those were the, so in the book uses different terms, but those were the White Walkers. So those were the smarter of, so that's where the babies.
So, okay, so that was how, okay, so.
Yep. And then the other, like the army, that's dead folks that those folks have risen. And they set it up, you know, in some of the previous episodes that if you kill the one that turned them, then everybody they turn. So I think the fact that the Night King's dead, he was the first one, I think it's all done.
Gotcha. All right. So I guess they never made the correlation to me of where the babies fit into the story. So
yeah.
But I mean, just to your point, right? We needed 3 minutes of dialogue between Bran and King Nightwalker to, like, just tie this things up for me.
Yep. Why was Bran significant to the Night King? We don't know. You know, what was his big plan? Why did he care? Was it, yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess they would say they told you was because he was the 3-eyed raven, right? And the Night King always wanted to kill the 3-eyed raven, but that doesn't answer your question. But that was as much information as they've given us.
Yeah, I feel like the buildup was not was too much for what that was. I think having Arya kill him in the way that she did, I did not see that coming.
Nope.
And in a good way, like that was. When it first happened, you know, when he saw her and he reached her and he grabbed her, I'm like, maybe we're gonna lose that. But then the whole, you know, the sword, that 10 seconds of filming, 15, it was brilliant. I was a big fan of that.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to, you know, say where did she come from? I mean, the last I checked, you know, there was a big circle of bad guys.
Well, so earlier, and I haven't gone back and watched it, but earlier in that episode when she comes out of the library and all that, it was a weird deal. She was like standing there, and then she's like, I gotta go, and she just takes off. She takes off running. Well, I think now we know that's where she was going. How she knew to go there, how she got there. Yeah.
Oh, no. Okay, yeah, I mean, I agree we knew she was, but I'm saying, like, literally dudes encircled with lots of, you know, evil bad guys, and somehow she jumps on his back, right? There was a lot of...
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So that's the part that I was not...
Yeah, she's little. Maybe she crawled through their legs. They just sneaky. Well, and I guess the other thing is, you know, the Night King had basically told them all to stand down. So if they'd have seen her, they probably wouldn't have done anything because he kind of had them all holding position. They didn't kill Theon. They didn't kill Bran. He just kind of... but I thought that was good. That was... And somebody posted a clip of season 3 where Melisandre, the red, you know, lady, when she was with Arya, and she said something like, you know, you're going to do things, you're going to kill many men, brown eyes, green eyes, blue eyes, like this very deliberate pause. That was kind of cool that would, so.
Yeah, she was a nice touch back into the story. I kind of liked, you know.
A little bit, yeah. I thought, so the big thing that she did was the flaming swords. I will admit I have an unreasonable love for flaming swords. Like every time the brothers would do that and they would light the swords up, I'm like, I gotta get me a flaming sword. Like I gotta have one of those. So when she went and lit all the Dothraki things, I thought that was great. But ultimately they completely pooched the whole Dothraki thing. So
yeah. That was speaking of flaming things. Why didn't one of us buy a Tesla flamethrower? How did we both miss that?
That was before I had any Tesla stuff. I don't know if I was saving up. So I've been watching a bunch of like Vikings and The Last Kingdom and reading those books. So I've been reading a bunch of things about, you know, medieval or early, you know, military tactics more than I would have had like a year and a half ago. And so watching them set that up and the big Dothraki raid and all, I'm like, oh my God, you guys are terrible. Don't do that. And your trenches in the wrong spot. And why? So that was painful to watch. I don't know.
Yeah, I saw somebody defend that as saying that unfortunately the Dothraki were only open field fighters, so like that was the only way they could really be used, was to be released like that. So that was the justification that someone had for it.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess the other thing, I've read some stuff, and they're like, well, they weren't tactically, that battle wasn't tactical, but it made for a good show, and that was ultimately, what the intent was. But yeah, there was just, I mean, they had some good ideas, like the flaming barricades. I thought that was a good idea, but then the whites just sacrificing themselves to snuff out that was a good yeah. That's one thing, and I can't remember. I think it was somebody, a long time ago was talking about the Nightmare on Elm Street movies and how scary Freddy was. And they're like, it's really tough to fight someone who doesn't care if they die. Like, that's just that. Not only can you not get your head into that mind space, but there's just so few tools you can use against somebody. And that's what these people are. They're just, they're mindless. They don't care. So they're not trying to preserve themselves.
And you have an endless horde, right? I mean, at this point he had millions, hundreds, I don't know. It was a lot.
Yep, and then he had all the Dothraki and all the, So I there was no major deaths, which kind of disappointed me. It was dark. I had a hell of a time watching the first battle part of it. Don't like that filming technique at all.
So speaking of other disappointment, right? So we talked about it last week that we were pretty sure the crypt was going to come into play, and so he raises up and they start coming out, but really there was nothing. That was a pointless waste of 30 seconds. I mean, they didn't. Some skeletons came out and went, ah! I was like, Scooby-Doo. It was stupid.
Well, yeah, and we mentioned last week that they beat us over the head with, go down to the crypt, you'll be safe there. Hey, have you heard everybody in the crypt's going to be safe? So, I mean, clearly, they were foreshadowing. But yeah, the only thing was they were kind of boxed in when the bad guys were coming down, and you're like, oh no, the people in the crypt are going to get it. But it was not the big thing that we thought it was going to be.
Yeah, there was no some old Stark goes to kill Sansa and Tyrion jumps in. It was lame.
Yeah, I did love at one point when Tyrion and Sansa were hiding back there and talking about being married, and she said, "You're of all my husbands, you're the best," and he said something like, "How horrid!" I'm like, that was spot on. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it would have been a tough episode to get right, and I think they did okay, but I was not, I still think Hardhome was a better episode. I still think the episode where they're on the island, I can't remember the name of that one, when they were north of the wall last season, I thought that was a better battle episode. I don't know.
Yep, I'm with you.
I'm going to keep watching. They got 3 more episodes. And I think they did a good job, though, and we've probably already known this, but the big battle was not the White Walkers and the Night King. It was really what's going to happen between, Winterfell and King's Landing.
So what do you think? So next week, do we get another battle? Next week, do we get another episode of everyone talking a whole bunch to plot out the story? Which has usually been their kind of MO, right? They're usually one than the other. So are we going to walk out of next week with a bunch of new information? We'll enjoy it, but not... up?
I think we can't have 2 back-to-back epic battles. But again, they got 3 episodes left, so that pretty much means episode 5, the penultimate episode, has to be battle. And we'd also thought before that maybe the Night King was going to send some folks down to King's Landing to rattle their cage. Turns out that must not have been the case. Yeah,
no, that was sad that nothing really happened there. So yes, I'm guessing next week's episode... I'm guessing the assassin dude shows up to try and do something to Tyrion, whether or not he does or not.
Yep.
Do we pull in some other line? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. What do we do next week? What's next week's episode look like?
Euron has to show up or do something.
Oh yeah, that idiot.
Yeah, I don't know. One of my buddies and I, him and I have been talking about shows for decades. When you have a show winding down, the like this. If you ask, 100 people, they all have a pretty much the same general idea how it should end. And if it doesn't end like that, people get mad. I think for this one, people don't have a good idea how that's Like if you asked 1,000 people who's going to end up on the Iron Throne, there's not going to be a majority. The
Right.
plurality will be, something else. But I just don't know. I don't know how I think it should end. I don't know how I think it's going to end. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think the tough thing there is going to be, I'm with you, I have no idea who ends up on the Iron Throne. But I think the toughest part is going to be, not tough, but no matter who it is, we're going to be like, oh yeah, I see that. I see how they told me it was going to happen. And right, I think that, we're going to have that type of closure. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No matter who it is. But you could probably go back and look and see, right? Or people have already done it, right? There's a storyline that gets five different people there. So I guess that's the good news for them is unless they decide that, that Ghost becomes the king on the Iron Throne, I think we're going to get the bow, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I'm interested. I'm curious to see how it turns out.
I just hope it's not Cersei. I think that would annoy what out of everyone.
Though it's not above Martin to do that. He's not above that.
Yeah. Danny doing it at this point just seems too obvious. John doing it seems like meh. So yeah, it's almost right to stay in their tradition. It's got to be somebody random, but.
Yep. I don't know. Well, it was a decent episode. I didn't text you when I got done because it was getting late your time, so I didn't know what you were doing. Didn't want to wake you or wake the family.
I finished about 12:15. So same thing. I didn't want to say I'm done, and then I knew I didn't want to really talk about it because I wanted to have a conversation here.
Yep. Mark's saying you think it'll be Arya. I would be okay with that. And Gendry. Yeah.
Arya's not the governance type though.
She's not.
So
she wasn't the fighter type either. They made that work.
Yeah.
You
do kind of get the impression, I could definitely see it being a woman, right?
Yep.
He seems to favor them in power.
Yep.
And, right, I guess the ultimate thumb, if you think about how long we wanted Joffrey dead, and he wouldn't give it to us, maybe this is his last FU as he puts Cersei in power at the end, so we all just go, oh. And he's like, haha, you're going to be pissed off for years about that.
You'll never forget. It'll be like the ending of The Sopranos. People will be talking about it for decades after it happened.
Yeah, it was like the movie The Perfect Storm, like the George Clooney one. I loved everything until the end of that, and they all just died, and I was like, well, that sucks. I hate that movie.
Well, that was a true story. You knew how
it didn't matter. I loved that movie up until they all were dead. And I'm like, I don't want to end the movie at a funeral. You just go to hell, you crappy movie.
We Americans are definitely conditioned to have happy endings, and if we don't get our happy endings, we get mad.
Yeah.
Like there is. That is. There have been a lot of movies. My archetype for that is the movie City of Angels. I don't know if you saw that. That was Nick Cage and Meg Ryan.
Yeah.
20 years ago was when I was first dating my wife. Spoiler alert. So Nick Cage is an angel. He falls in love with Meg Ryan. In order to, be with her, he has to renounce his angelhood, and it's just this big deal, and he decides to do it for love, and he renounces his angelhood, and they're together, and then, like, the next morning, she's riding her bike down the road and gets hit by a truck. And I'm watching this movie, and I don't remember if I legitimately screamed profanities in the theater at the time, but it wouldn't surprise me. I'm like, that is I've never forgiven that movie for that, and that's been 20-some years. But that's, as Americans, we need our happy endings. And that was clearly not it. She's riding a bike and gets hit by a truck. And I'm like, oh, my God. Hated that. So, yeah, we like our happy endings.
Yeah.